On March 18th, 1990, the most audacious art heist of all time took place at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Two men dressed as police officers were admitted into the building by security, claiming to be responding to a disturbance call.
In 81 minutes, 13 pieces of art were stolen. Among the portraits, stripped from their frames, were works by Vermeer, Degas, and Rembrandt. Estimated at $500 million, the heist has been categorized as the largest and most frustrating of all time. Theories of their whereabouts and those who perpetrated the crime are abundant.
In this podcast series, we will dig as deep as possible into the case, the theories, and the social and economic impact the greatest unsolved art heist of all time had on the community. This is Empty Frames. Welcome back to Empty Frames. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how goes it?
It is going so well. I am so glad to be doing this particular episode.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one, Lance. There's no guest today. Zilch, just me and you. And we're going to talk about our thoughts on the season so far and where the heck we're going for the remaining 4 episodes of Season 3, which is what is left after this one. Contractually speaking, anyway.
Exactly. We have 7 episodes in the can. This is episode 8, so we're just past the halfway point, and this season feels a little bit more progressive than Season 1. Season 1 was a sort of information gathering, talking to people who hadn't been spoken to or spoken with about the heist. I feel like this is leading somewhere. I feel like Season 3 is leading somewhere, and I feel like an episode like this, where we bring everything into one place, go over it, sort of refresh and calibrate where we're going from here. I feel like that is necessary at this point to bring everything sort of in the same room and source it out.
And so this season has been a bit of a roller coaster so far. We kicked off the season with author and filmmaker Casey Sherman. And he came out and really just really kind of slapped us across the face with his information. I mean, it was a bit shocking that he sort of took a critical view of Anthony Amore. And I say that because not many people do that, you know. In fact, God, I don't know if anyone's ever done that publicly in the Gardner case that I know of, other than maybe a little bit here and there on Twitter. But really, everyone says how good he is, how nice of a guy he is, and we don't know him. And I think that's a big distinction that we need to make because I feel a little bad about the criticism that some of our guests have given to Anthony Amore, the security director at the Gardner Museum. And he's been there since 2005 running the investigation into the art heist and where the art could be. And I feel a little bad because I kind of agree. One of our guests, Muddy, the Muddy River fact checker, says that they don't really owe us an investigation at all. And I think that's actually a really good point. But with that said, Casey Sherman's criticism is important because it comes from someone who knows Anthony Amore. They've had a working relationship in the past, respected each other, liked each other. And Casey Sherman is saying that Anthony Amore needs to step aside. He essentially calls for his job.
I mean, I do feel bad with the criticism, but Anthony Amore was this sort of untouchable character in the whole Gardner heist storyline. It was like if you said something bad about him, you were essentially saying something bad about Isabella Stewart Gardner herself, because he was the face of the museum and the face of the heist and the recovery process. But Casey Sherman is from Boston. He's been writing about Boston. He's been really woven into the fabric of Boston with his journalism, his books, his research. He has gone everywhere from Whitey Bulger up to, not in Boston, but the White Mountains. He's done research on the showdown up there in Franconia.
And the Boston Marathon bombing, which is so personal to the city of Boston.
Exactly. And also the Boston Strangler, his aunt, was one of the victims of Albert DeSalvo. So all of that being said, Casey Sherman has a resume and he has the reputation and the right to call on Anthony Amore and say,
here in Boston, we look toward, the success, whether it's a sports team or an investigation, looking at Amore's track record. And, I used to be very friendly with Anthony and had a lot of respect for him. But, when you do the same thing over and over again and you expect a different result, sometimes it is time for a change. And I do think that, his narrow-mindedness, especially with this particular case, and not allowing other real experts in terms of recovering stolen art to become part of a team, really, to me, is the wrong way to approach recovering any of these stolen art pieces.
It's the sports comparison. I mean, people in Boston take their sports very seriously, and if any coach or any owner of the Patriots, the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, if any of them were losing for 20 plus years consistently, they would be replaced. And that's essentially a point that he makes publicly.
He made it in an article too, I think, for the Herald. He made that point, and then we sort of discussed that with him in the episode. And he again doubles down. Really says that Amore needs to open up the circle of people who are, working on the investigation. We kind of key right in and assume that he's talking about Arthur Brand. Of course, Arthur Brand was on an episode of ours from season 1 called Art Brand, and he is known as the Indiana Jones of the art world, the living Indiana Jones.
Well, I think Arthur is certainly first and foremost in my mind. I've written several articles for the Boston Herald about Arthur Brand and his offer to become very involved with recovering the art and doing whatever he can at this point to get that art back. And I've spoken to Anthony Amore personally about Arthur Brand, and Amore has dismissed him to me, which I think is kind of the wrong approach when you have a successful art investigator who's got a track record of success, and then you have a guy like Amore who's, again, spent 15 years working on one case and has absolutely nothing to show for it. And again, I think it also comes back to the idea that it's one reward as opposed to 13 individual rewards. And again, Arthur Brand has certainly championed that effort along with, other investigators. As you guys probably know, there's a former art thief in the UK called Paul Turbo Hendry, who's been pitching that idea for several years now. And to just be dismissed out of hand as if it's the wrong approach, to me, is not the right approach at all.
We have had email correspondences with Anthony Amore. We have asked him to come on the show, and we have not been able to rein him in. We haven't been able to get a commitment on whether or not he will come on the show. We don't even know if he's able to come on the show. So
he's not going to come on the show. And I'll just say it. It's okay. It's okay. But he's not going to come on the show.
And that's fine. Because I don't know what he would be contractually allowed to say or what he would even want to say if he were to come on the show.
I think he would say, "Shut up, you two idiots." I think that's...
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be no information about the heist itself, about any investigation or any movement or any sort of change in policy the way our friend Turbo wants in regards to the recovery process. There's not going to be anything like that if he were to come on the show. He's certainly not coming on the show and saying, "Listen, guys, I heard all the episodes. I went to the board of the Gardner Museum, and you know what? We're restructuring the recovery process. You and Turbo, you guys nailed it."
That's a great point. That is definitely not happening. Anthony Amore is not walking through that door, and the board of trustees are not walking through that door right now to change the reward price list.
Larry Bird's not walking through that door, fans. Kevin McHale's not walking through that door, and Robert Parrish is not walking through that door.
Again, this is part of the entirety of the criticism. It really kind of centers around the reward price list and the rigidity of Anthony Amore and the board. But also, I want to mention Arthur Brand, this Indiana Jones of the art world. This guy claimed to have a great lead on the Gardner art a few years ago, and poof, it's gone because apparently the Gardner and the security director Amore and maybe the board, I don't know, they aren't working with Arthur Brand on that lead.
Hard to say, right? Hard to say if it's something that is just going on behind the scenes that we're not allowed to know about, or if it is something that was taken from Brand to work on exclusively and the ball was dropped somewhere along the way. I don't know.
But why not work with him? I mean, why? What could be the purpose? I mean, and I think Casey Sherman kind of points to ego. And again, I don't know Anthony Morey, so I can't really say that. But maybe you're right. Maybe he did. Maybe they did take the lead from Brand in some way. It doesn't seem like that's what happened based on what has been written about this lead and what Brand has said on Twitter, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. It doesn't feel like Brand would be somebody who would just give away a lead either.
I mean, I'm sure he wants the art. Like, I don't think it's about the reward for him. I'm sure he'd love some of the reward, but I'm obviously he would make a huge splash as the Indiana Jones of the art world if he were to recover even one piece of the Gardner art. The publicity would be more important to him than the reward.
You can't put a price tag on that. You can't put a price tag on being the person who recovered the art from the most successful heist in American and perhaps world history. And there's no harm in having a working relationship between Anthony Morey and Art Brand. Both of them can be household names. Both of them can be able to say, yeah, we did this. We recovered it. Anthony Morey can say, I enlisted the help of Arthur Brand. That was my genius move. And Arthur Brand can say, yeah, I jumped aboard, I found some leads, and I did my job. And, where's my TV contract?
And Turbo and Muddy River Fact Checker from episodes 2 and 3, they both agree that Arthur Brand should be working on this case. So it's really hard to find someone who would disagree with that, especially because he said he had a lead. And Lance, as you know, I've been reading a lot of books, a lot more since
not
the COVID-19 quarantine hit. And two of the books that I read during this time, one was Hunting Whitey, of course, by the aforementioned Casey Sherman guest. But another one was Priceless by Robert Whitman. So I've learned a lot about art crime in the past few months. And Whitman, I believe, was really close at one point to the Gardner artwork. And so I think that Brand was probably on the right track too. I think there's a really good chance that Whitman's lead with these Corsican mobsters was legit, and it's possible that Brand is talking to these same people or whoever has the artwork now. I mean, what I learned from the book is that stolen art and stolen treasures, like the ones that FBI art crime team founder Robert Whitman helped recover in his career with the FBI, is that they always resurface. So you just wait. Like that might be part of the Gardner investigation strategy, honestly, is just wait it out because things are going to surface.
That's a really interesting strategy. Perhaps that's correct. I don't know. You mentioned Robert Whitman. Robert Whitman is sort of a rock star. We have reached out to him a couple of times and received no response, but we're just a couple of slobs. We get it. We're not being bitter about that. It's tough to get people to respond. And we were talking about Art Brand, and he was on season 1. We reached out to him for a follow-up episode on season 3, and he responded, but he didn't address coming on the show. He actually responded about Muddy River. It was a single sentence about him, and it wasn't derogatory in any way. He was just commenting on the Twitter battle that was happening. Like, this is crazy, don't you think? And he didn't really respond to coming on the show. But maybe we'll get him back. But anyway, that Priceless book and that theory, it is very interesting to roll the old noggin around on. It's something that could be a tactic. Maybe they are waiting it out. Maybe they're like, yeah, this is exactly right. After X amount of years, in historically speaking, stolen art starts to pop up, and we're coming to that point now. Maybe after 30 years, something starts to emerge, or not if it's destroyed.
So the problem with that is if Robert Whitman, again, the founder of the FBI's art crime team, one of the best ever at recovering stolen art and artifacts, if he's right and the Gardner art, at least some of it, the Rembrandt and the Vermeer, were in the hands of those Corsican mobsters. That means that the paintings could be in Europe because at one point they were there. So then that is one of the reasons why I suggested that this Arthur Brand lead could be legit, because obviously he is Danish, he is working in Europe, and he has a new book that's out called Hitler's Horses. I believe it's out in other languages, not English, right now. If that was out in English, I would have read it by now, Lance. As you
I'm
know,
surprised you didn't learn German just so you could read it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, so that's why I thought that maybe he's onto the right lead, because it's been I don't know, like 15 years or something since the lead that Robert Whitman was talking about. So that would be enough time for it to have surfaced again, resurfaced, you know?
Yeah, just the term Corsican Mafia makes me nervous. Just saying Corsican Mafia, it just feels a lot more violent than saying Italian Mafia. And we know the Italian Mafia or the Irish Mafia was rather violent. Corsican Mafia makes me think of Blood Eagles and things like that.
Well, yeah, actually, the description of these fellows in Robert Whitman's book was kind of like that. They were very ruthless and murderous. And so if that is where the art is now, then that would be with some dangerous people for sure.
And that would explain why you haven't seen it. You know, I mean, that is that is a heavily protected syndicate.
See, look, what you have to understand, guys, and this is a broader perspective of the stolen art world. Imagine a room with all the stolen art in the world inside. You had two doors to that room. One door is the door law enforcement and Anthony Amore and investigators use to keep chipping away to try to get in. That door opens every now and again, and they go in and they snatch some stolen art back, and maybe arrest people, indict them. That happens every now and again. The other door is covered in cobwebs, because that is the door where a private recovery happens, where you negotiate with the person on the other side of the door, and the door opens and the art comes out, and whatever is negotiated goes in and it slams shut again. So that's the door I'm saying we should be using in the Gardner case after 30 years. Yes, when, like, the Van Gogh was stolen a couple of months ago in Holland, that is being investigated through stolen art door number 1, with law enforcement trying to chip away and smash the door down, recover the Van Gogh, arrest people. Yes, right. But the Gardner case should be door 2, the cobweb-filled door that gets used very, very rarely. I can name cases where it's happened. The Turner case, it's happened. Several other cases that it's happened where it's been decided that the recovery of the artwork is more important than prosecutions. The thing that gives the Gardner case the advantage is that there's been so long a time, 30 years. Now, they've tried everything to go through door number 1, and they can't get through it. No one has ever been able to crack door number 1. So all I'm saying is let's try door number 2 now.
But back to the reward price list, because if that's true, I mean, and these Corsican mobsters, or gangsters, they have a couple of these paintings, or even one of them. Like, this is why the price list needs to be adjusted.
The olive branch we're looking for is the Gardner Art Reward Price List. So there's 13 different rewards offered, and then we can move on to talk about the conditions. The condition, right, I've come up with an idea where it says good condition. Why not say 2 words, restorable condition? Now, restorable condition, I believe, is broad enough to cover the fact that it won't be in good condition, bad condition, horrible condition, whatever condition it's in, as long as it is restorable, okay, the reward will be paid. That, again, that is something quite simple. Change the word good condition to restorable condition.
And I do want to point out that Muddy River Fact Checker, on one of the episodes, he did say that the finial, there is already a separate price on the finial for $100K, I guess. So you could return the finial and get that $100,000. So anyone listening out there who has that, please do the right thing with that one.
First of all, it should be remembered that there is a separate price list on the finial of $100,000, which is about 20 times more than it's worth, although it probably has some kind of cachet or, extra value if it was the actual stolen one.
But that's not enough. We need more than that.
Yeah, the breakdown of each piece of art having a price tag associated with it just makes the most sense at this point. And not only because it will open up the opportunity for one or two pieces to then snowball into 4 or 5 or the entirety of the collection. Not only that, but it doesn't interrupt with any current investigation or technique or tactic that the people investigating it, like Anthony Amore might have. Hypothetically speaking, if they're doing the whole wait and see thing, that's not affected by changing the structure of the return, unless I'm missing something. If you were to change the structure of the recovery of the return effort, I don't see how that would. I see those two things existing exclusively independently from each other. There's no. The one does not impact the other.
Anthony Moray is a really smart guy. There are really smart people on the board of directors. They can make these changes. They can figure out a way to do it. And also, Turbo, from one of the episodes, suggests changing the terminology of good condition to restorable condition. And I think that's a really important piece of this reward price list change that we're pushing for, too.
Yeah, I agree, and I would push that even one step further and say any condition, because restorable condition is a bit, I guess, ambiguous. It's like, how far gone would it have to be before you could restore it to some sort of condition, It could be nearly destroyed, and you can put some, duct tape and scotch tape on it and say, look, now it's restored to the best condition possible. I would say any condition.
These artworks were damaged during the heist itself, so the idea, again, that they're all in good condition, to me is a long shot. I think, that language should be, tweaked or revised. We just want the art back, regardless of what condition they are in. There are art restorers who can work on these types of pieces to actually, get them or improve them enough where they can be put back on the walls of the Gardner. But I think, beyond the beauty of the individual art pieces themselves, the idea that the art is returning to the Gardner Museum would help with a lot of healing within not only the art community here in Boston, but the law enforcement community as well.
I'm okay. I signed the petition to have the price list. I don't think it's that essential. I don't, if the art is lost and no one knows where it is, then a price list isn't going to change that. I don't think it's the most essential thing. I do think they have professional people to negotiate with it. But if Arthur Brand, who has actually negotiated these kind of things, says it would be helpful, then I think we're entitled to a non-rancorous discussion about the pros and cons.
And I wanted to mention, definitely check out Casey Sherman's book, Hunting Whitey. Obviously, Whitey Bulger as a figure in the Gardner case comes up a lot in our investigations, in season 1 especially. But Casey Sherman's page-turning book called Hunting Whitey really documents the capture and killing of Whitey Bulger. And really, he claims that Whitey Bulger was not involved in the Gardner art. And actually, they go into some detail in the book about how Whitey Bulger said that him and his partner, I believe Kevin Flynn, they gave some beatings around the town to local gangsters just trying to find out who did it. And they couldn't find out. And so when Whitey Bulger was arrested, I think it's fair to say that he probably would have used that, but also he was going up the river no matter what, so maybe he wasn't giving up anyone. He did hate rats. He hated them, even though he was one, the dirtiest rat of all, actually.
Well, I think his significant other would have been a good reason for him to give up some of the artwork to reduce her sentence at least.
Great point.
And he never did.
That's a great point.
Because what did she end up doing, like 16 years or something?
I forget what she was sentenced to, but she definitely didn't serve that much. She is out as of the current recording of this, and hasn't been out for too long. So maybe 10 years she served or something like that. But
regardless of the amount of time she did, she was going to do time. And you'd think that if Whitey had the opportunity to provide something that would reduce her time because he knew nothing was going to help him with his time, he probably would have done that. But we do know that he told everything to Chris Duett of Criminal Perspective in multiple letters. He confessed to numerous crimes, including the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist, and told Chris where the paintings were.
Not true, though. You should listen to Criminal Perspective on the Crawlspace Network. It is a great show where Chris interviews killers from prison, and he did have some correspondence with Whitey Bulger, so you're not making that part up. And I believe they even talked about the gardener, but Whitey said he didn't know anything about it.
Now, Tim, you mentioned Arthur Brand and Anthony Amore and Robert Whitman. These are known art investigators, and a couple of them have actually returned artwork. But then we have this character, Chris Marinello, who has been thrown into the mix. And Chris Marinello operates a company called Art Recovery International. And if you go to his website, he credits himself as being one of the world's foremost experts in recovering stolen, looted, and missing works of art. He's a lawyer.
Chris Marinello, what he does, he's a lawyer, right? He doesn't actually physically recover stolen art, say like Arthur Brand does. He's a paperwork guy. If a piece of stolen art surfaces in an auction or it surfaces at a dealer's, the insurance company that paid out the original claim would contact Chris Marinello and say, Chris, can you do the paperwork about legal ownership? He does that and gets 20% of the insurance claim. So on $1 million recovery that surfaced, that he had nothing to do with it surfacing, he does the paperwork and he would get $200,000.
And where do you get that information from? How is that 20% the figure that you're certain about?
Chris Marinello has told me the range of what they charge in the industry ranges from 39% Mondex charges, 50% Clemens Trousseau used to charge. The Art Loss Register charges 25%. Chris Marinello says he charges 20% of the value of the claim. On Nazi looted cases, he says he charges 15%. He also says he does not charge fees. Other art recovery specialists charge ongoing fees, thousands of dollars per month or whatever, and ongoing fees. Right, so I got this from Chris Marinello himself. It's no big secret. You can go to his website, Art Recovery International, and all the details are there.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a spat, I guess, that developed or maybe started on Twitter and kind of developed over email, and that was between Chris Marinello and Turbo Paul. And so I don't know, and again, with Amore, I don't know Chris Marinello. I think we've had some email contact with him. He's welcome to come on the show and discuss this, but I don't understand what the infighting is all about, and I don't really know what to do being caught in the middle of it, because we do see a lot of emails from people, and there's some of them are just a little out of line, to be honest, and some of the tweets and things like that. So maybe we can just all kind of rise above any kind of name calling or threatening or things like that. Everyone is pushing for the exact same thing, which is the recovery of the artwork ultimately. And Lance, the storyline that we'll get into in a little bit is more about talking about the thieves, but potentially that could lead to recovering the artwork if the theory is correct.
Yeah, and I want to just say I've got nothing against Chris Marinello. I've got nothing against Art Recovery International. I think the cause is really good. I'm just questioning the motivation, and I'm questioning his recovered artworks, because if you go to the website, there's a list of art that's wanted, and the Gardner Museum is right there on the top. He even uses images from the Gardner Museum in the banner on his website, the empty frames hanging there, which we were told that we weren't allowed to do anything like that if we were promoting something. So I think that's interesting. I'm just questioning the motivation there. And to your point...
Don't tell me what my point is. Sorry, the Boston in me came out there for a second.
No problem. You've been reading a lot of Casey Sherman. I just am concerned that there are individuals that are operating with some ulterior motives and inserting themselves for other purposes. I could be wrong, but that's just my gut on that.
Well, I see what you're saying, and I think I get your point. I don't really see it as problematic right now, though, because as we were kind of just talking about, the artwork, or at least some of it, some of the more important ones, and really they're all important. But the Vermeer and the Rembrandt could be in Europe, and so if for whatever reason the Gardner is blocking Arthur Brand from making a move, and whoever has the artwork now sees Chris Marinello's banner, I feel like that could be a good thing. Make that connection somehow. If Marinello's working with the museum, great to have someone in Europe. I don't understand why it's not Brand. I don't understand why they all can't work together. That's the part where I'm left scratching my head. But at least there's an effort there.
Gotcha. A lot of egos going on.
Yeah, that could be what it is, and also Anthony Amore. I want to mention Anthony Amore has written several books on stolen art, and he's got a new one that's coming out very soon. So make sure to check that one out too. It is not about the Gardner, but one thing we did talk about with the Muddy River Fact Checker is that I would love to read a book from Anthony Amore about the Gardner. So he's written books about other subjects in art crime, but I really just think that maybe their strategy should shift in that department. And you know what? Just do it. Just go for it. If you're the guy with all the knowledge, and everyone still wants to know what the knowledge is, then just do it. What are we waiting for? In the same breath, I understand where there'd be criticism on either side there. You either do it or you don't. Just figure out a way, though. Figure out a way where everyone's happy. Donate some to the museum. Make it a dual thing. Promote it at the museum. Obviously, there's ways to make this happen.
100%. I mean, if you want to email the board of directors or contact just the museum itself until you get an answer.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And Turbo Paul really pushes everyone to email the board of directors and Anthony Amore and push for this price list, push for the terminology changing to restorable. And because they are doing the heist walk at the Gardner Museum, the beautiful Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, by the way, go visit when you can, because it is a spectacular building. But they do something now, like what we're kind of talking about with kind of promoting the heist finally after 30 years. They have something where Anthony Amore is sort of narrating you through the heist, which honestly a lot of people want to know. And, they want that experience. It's a little bit of dark tourism through one of the most famous crimes in the history of the world. So why not just go with it? The empty frames are still there. Just go with it.
Yeah, and it's dark tourism, but it's also educational. You will learn about these works of art. You will learn about that time period, the Dutch Renaissance.
And that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
See the paintings. And to that rigidity of the Gardner, when we spoke to Brandon Sieco,
the riveting Brandon Sieco.
He has a brilliant idea, the hacking the heist thing, and we'll pop a link in the show notes or check that one out from season 1. But basically, you can hold like an iPad or an iPhone up to the empty frames and actually see the artwork. So please implement something like that, for Christ's sake.
So we've been saying to contact the museum, to contact Anthony Amore. To do that, you can simply email Anthony Amore at theft@isgm.org. That's THEFT@isgm.org. That is his email address, or you can call him directly, 617-278-5114. The information is on gardnermuseum.org. I wanted to bring up real quick the Muddy River Fact Checker. He is very passionate about the case, about the heist. He's very passionate about the museum itself and about the area, very passionate about the Fenway area. And the details that he brings to the table are really, invaluable. We had him on season 2, I believe it was episode 6, where we get into the minutia of the heist. I think that was actually the title of it. And he has written a script based on the heist, and at some point we will read that script as an episode. If it's not this season, it could be a bonus episode. So stay tuned for that. He really takes a lot of the details that he has compiled and puts it into this narrative, and it's really cool, really fascinating, and really you can learn a lot from it.
And now, Lance, we wanted to talk about the storyline brought forth by our latest two guests. We've done 2 episodes now with them, 2 full interviews in episodes 6 and 7 of season 3 here. They are Charles Pinning and Pamela Wall, and really a couple of artists, a writer and an illustrator, and really interesting people who have come up with what we call the most compelling single theory that we've heard about the Gardner heist, like specific to a single thief, because really out of all the books, all the theories, really nothing kind of sticks so close, like sticks like glue, you know what I mean? And this, I'm not really sure this sticks like glue, but it's at least super interesting.
You nailed it. It has its moments where things aren't really connecting, but for the most part, I'd say 95% of it makes a lot of sense. And not just on the surface, it makes a lot of sense when you're looking back at the case. There's a lot of things that play into the heist itself and the aftermath that make a lot of sense when you're talking about the thieves actually being filmmakers who were doing some sort of performance art. One of the major convincers for me is that nothing has turned up. We talk about the mafia, we talk about organized crime, some syndicate, some exchanges, certain leads that don't seem to pan out, and it simply could be that these artists stole all of these works, left the empty frames as a message, which they said they would do. They even have an organization called the Art Liberation Front that has it in the title. They're liberating the art. They're taking the art out of the frames, and they've said the most valuable part of a work of art is the frame if you're actually attaching a dollar value to it. And if you were to approach the heist like that, this is a message.
The Art Liberation Front thing that he talks about is kind of silly in its own, but there's a lot of truth embedded in it.
Joe is the mastermind behind all of this, and I want to ask you, what exactly is the Art Liberation Front?
Well, the Art Liberation Front is a group that we formed after the fact, after the crime, and basically we're creating meta art, which is art about art.
The art about art, as he says in the interview, we were making meta art, which is art about art. So, in the case of stealing a painting, right, you're doing a performance, so the art is the painting, and you're making art, a performance about stealing the art. So you're making meta art.
It is significant that Patient has been characterized in his recent workup conference as oppositional. He has sought out a series of authority figures, teachers, law officers, art curators, etc., who are limit setters to rebel against.
He rebels against authority figures or limit setters, including, the police and art curators. All of this little segment out of Sociopath, the interview with Spalding Gray, which has the audience giggling and all because Joe's such a charmer, was really just jam-packed with motive information.
These artists could have simply taken them and stashed them in their 2-bedroom apartment down the street. They could have buried them. We'll take the art and not think about it. We'll make a movie about taking the art and not think about it, which is also very fascinating to consider that there is a video documentation somewhere out there of the art theft.
Our theory is that it was, they went in to make a movie, which is what they do, and it kind of went off the rails at a certain point, even though Rick Abbott had voluntarily let them in, he didn't sign on for that.
But he was caught on film. So he was already screwed. Now, if you go back to the 77 Art Liberation Front piece in the Berkeley Barb, they talk about publicity-hungry organization were inveterate opportunists, Gibbons said. Gibbons, the spokesperson for the 6-member group, told the Barb, "Our philosophy is full of contradictions. It has nothing to do with Diebenkorn. It was about museums in general. We saw the opportunity for some publicity, and we grabbed it." And it talks about how they must always act spontaneously. And so this idea of spontaneity is something that's been in Gibbons's mind, for a long time. And in fact, it's kind of the way he's lived his life. Joe's a pretty spontaneous guy. And I think that what happened was they told Rick Abbott that they were going to shoot a museum robbery film, and then he'd put the painting back, but it spun out of control. It went elsewhere.
Well, my gosh, I would love to see that if there was really some kind of film about the Gardner theft, or actually filmed during the Gardner theft, because I think it would have been on film. So we're talking about Joe Gibbons. He is a guy who has been convicted of robbing banks, and he did rob a painting from this Oakland museum in 1977, and that is really when the Art Liberation Front kind of came to light. And it's sort of a goofy thing, and kind of like just a bullshit excuse to kind of steal a painting and sort of brand what you're doing as art itself, which I think with Charles and Pam we kind of get into the nature of art altogether, and artists being kind of con men or a con woman, in that kind of everyone is, right? Every single artist, if you're selling a product, it's worth as much as whatever someone's willing to pay for it. One of the quotes here in this magazine or newspaper from the Berkeley Barb from the fall of 1977, art and thievery are synonymous. So it's right there. And we hear it in Joe Gibbons' voice talking about the Art Liberation Front in an interview from his film, Confessions of a Sociopath, which is available on Vimeo. And it's a great watch. And there is a lot of information in there. There's this interview that he does with this fellow named Spalding Gray, really in front of an audience, which is really one of the more fascinating elements of it, because he's talking about stealing this painting in front of an audience. It makes for bizarre moments in his wonderful film.
And the audience is essentially captivated by his magnetism. He's a very magnetic personality. He's very charming, and he's got this sort of energy that he exudes. He's also an alcoholic, and he's experimented with drugs in the past, and he really lives on the edge. He doesn't have a job. He's opposed to having a full-time job, and he wants to live life a different way. He's got an alternative way of living life, and he met with Pinning, with Charles Pinning, the author. And on an aside, Charles Pinning did write a book called Irreplaceable, which has some elements of the Gardner Museum heist in there. It's a fictionalized account of that, but that was sort of the catalyst for him and Pamela to do their work and look into another alternative. And that's how they came upon Joe Gibbons. And he met Joe Gibbons and had a really incredible conversation, which he describes to us. And it's really amazing to hear how someone like Joe Gibbons can just entertain the theory that he was involved in the greatest heist in history. And he doesn't say, dude, what are you talking about? That's not me. This could ruin me if this gets out. He actually does if I were to do it, this is how it would have gone down. Like, it's incredible.
Right, so he kind of does that confabulation thing, and there might be some relation to when he's been intoxicated and talking about it. It seems like he does that, but when he's been sober, he does not take credit for doing the heist at all. In fact, he is vehemently against that. So we do know that, and we do know that Steve Kirchen was also there. Steve Kirchen, who wrote Master Thieves, obviously a very famous Boston journalist who wrote for the Boston Globe for very many years and wrote a million articles about the Gardner heist, as in Last Scene, et cetera, et cetera. Great guy by all accounts. He was there with Charles Pinning and Joe Gibbons at this restaurant, and even in Joe Gibbons' apartment at one point in New York City. So that really, I think, to me, speaks to the validity of the story, of the theory of, the Joe Gibbons theory that Charles and Pamela have brought to the table here.
Just having him, like you said, having him involved in this and entertaining the notion is enough to tell me that there's something there, that there's something interesting enough where he would want to get involved.
When we went down to New York and surprised Joe Gibbons, and we went down to a bar and talked together.
And sorry, you're saying we, you mean you and Steve Kirchen?
Yeah, Steve Kirchen and I. See, what that little story bears mentioning, because after we were getting nowhere, with law enforcement acting on our information, we thought the best way to crack this thing would be to go public. And so we got in touch with Steve Kirchen. Even though Steve had written a book called Master Thieves, Fingering Organized Crime, I knew from his reporting in the Globe that he really understood the facts of the theft. And so I was hoping that he could put aside his personal theory and, help us get the story into the Globe. And so he came down to Providence, and we sat in Pam's apartment. He came down a dozen times, and we discussed all of this. And so finally, he and I drove down to New York and talked to Joe. And Joe couldn't have been more gracious until his wife got home and threw us out of the apartment, her apartment. But he came down. He wanted to keep talking to us because, you see, Joe always wanted to know, why do we think I did it? Why do you think what do you know? And so he came down, and we bought him a nice big mojito in the restaurant next door, and he talked about knowing Rick Abath, but he did this he called it confabulation, where he said, well, he went to the museum the night of the theft to buy pot from Rick Abath, and Rick was upstairs suddenly and breaking the frames of paintings, and Joe said, no, Rick, that's not how you do it. To Pam and I, Joe was simply in the throes of he knew he was had. So in the throes of that, he was twisting the story around, blaming somebody else for what was happening. In other words, he pushed his role onto the Abath character. But yes, and so that's when it finally occurred to us, yes, Joe had somehow met Abath either through a drug deal, buying pot from him at the museum, or maybe they both did a security job together.
It's really hard to see how Joe Gibbons benefited from stealing the art. Like, it's not like it seemed like he stole them and is living high off the hog. In fact, maybe kind of the opposite. He's robbed banks this decade, or I guess the last decade. He actually filmed one with like a little camera or a phone and claimed in court that the robbery was performance art. So you can see where the theory kind of starts to take form.
Yeah, and I think that's my biggest problem with the theory is that at this point in his life, if he were to show conclusive proof that he was involved in the heist, I don't really think that it would be that bad for him career-wise. I don't know if there would be any jail time involved. I don't know if any fine would be handed down, but he would go down as one of the greatest anti-heroes ever if he came forward.
For the record, we'd love to talk to Joe Gibbons. I mean, his art is really interesting, and we'd love to talk to him. I don't know if he's guilty of this. Who knows, Also from Joe Gibbons' film Confessions of a Sociopath, he goes through sort of a little ploy he used to do where he would actually steal books and then sell them for cash, for drugs and film.
He was stealing books, particularly art books, because art books tend to be expensive. He'd steal them from a bookstore and then resell them to another bookstore, claiming that they were his reviewer copies. He talks about this openly in his movie Confessions of a Sociopath.
And there's a lot of footage of him actually stealing books in various stores too.
I stumbled on this ploy with a friend of mine, and we would pose as book reviewers. And well, first we'd have to procure books,
right?
And then we just pose as book buyers. Initially, he started shoplifting art books to support his habit. I wouldn't go to a bookstore and say, I'm a critic, can you give me a few books?
Right. You'd steal the books from a retail store.
Yes.
And you'd take them to the bookstore.
Yes.
Right. That was a lot of stealing, in order to get $40 a day, because you're paying rent too, right? Were you eating anything at the time?
We weren't paying rent, actually. Now I can pay the phone bill. I can buy some film. Pay for this car.
According to a friend of his that I talked to, he would, for instance, hide his camera in a paper bag on a shelf or stuff like that so he could film himself stealing books in bookstores. Being an artist and trying to get by is not an easy gig if coming up with money, and so he would come up with money this way. But he was also, as he said to Spalding Gray, he had developed a bit of a heroin habit out in San Francisco, and so he was stealing books and picking up money that way and reselling them, claiming they belonged to him and that they had been reviewer copies.
What an interesting thing to steal. When that first came up, that he did this and to steal and sell. I guess it's easy to steal books, but is it indicative of somebody who is now raising their game, like upping their game to steal paintings, to steal works of art? And furthermore, is it upping his game to then graduate to actually robbing a bank and filming it? In retrospect, it feels like those are the building blocks you'd need if you were creating this life performance art. So Confessions of a Sociopath talks about stealing books to, and selling them for drugs or selling them for cash, books to paintings, to bank robbery, all part of this great performance art, great lifelong performance art.
It's a really compelling theory, like we said. We don't know if it's true, but again, we'd love to have Joe Gibbons on to talk more about it. And Lance, this is The Last Dance, season 3 of Empty Frames. Who knows where it's going to go after our last 4 contracted episodes? But we will have Charles back. We do want to circle back regarding Muddy River Fact Checker's script and Turbo. We got to revisit with Turbo again, too, before the season's over.
Yeah, we sure do. We also want to get Arthur Brand back on. So hopefully these interviews can round out the rest of the season. Yeah, right now we're right at the crest of the roller coaster. And like I said in the beginning of this, I feel like this is leading somewhere. I don't feel like this is going to stop at episode 12. I feel like contractually, like you said, that's where we are supposed to stop, but I feel like there'll be more. I feel like there'll be some feedback after this.
Okay, everybody, we got 4 episodes left. I hope you liked this discussion here between me and Lance, just kind of batting around these ideas and sort of doing a little reset. And we're going to go forth for the last third of The Last Dance.